Okay. Okay, Barbara, we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening if you are in Canada, Toronto, in fact, where nearby Ian Hamilton is speaking to us. And I'm just delighted to be able to talk to Ian about his new book, The Sultan of Sarawak, which is a new Ava Lee mystery, part of the triad years, which because Eva Lee's career has been divided up into different things. So I was just talking to Australia's Sulari Gentle, and we talked about the Ned Kelly Award, which she has won. And Ian, your first book for Ava Lee won the Arthur Ellis Award. So tell us about the Canadian Award for Best First Mystery.
It is the Arthur Ellis Award, and Arthur Ellis was Canada's last hangman. This was named after. It was actually difficult to win. There were an awful lot of entries that year. In fact, winning any Arthur Ellis Award is becoming more and more difficult because the quality of the writing up here has grown and grown. There are a lot of very good Canadian writers.
Well, there are indeed. So it was terrific that Ava Lee managed to do that. Ava Lee is one of my very favorite protagonists. I mean, she's truly different in many respects. She is, you could call her a debt collector, you could call her a recovery specialist, or right now you can call her an investor. So you've had a good time kind of progressing her through a career.
Exactly. And I did a piece for Writer's Digest this month on the sort of the challenges of writing, keeping a series fresh. And I wrote about the fact, I think I was into the second or third book when I realized I might have a series, because I didn't know when I started out. And my immediate objective was to try to keep it as fresh as possible for my own self-interest as well as the readers. So I decided that I wanted to watch Ava develop, personally, career-wise. I wanted the characters around her to be constantly changing. So there's a large number of secondary characters, some of whom come and go, some of whom go and never come back, and some of whom are constantly adding. So I try to keep it fresh that way. Plus, I'm writing about different crimes. I'm not writing about like murder. I'm writing about all kinds of things. Okay? In The Sultan, I'm writing about illegal logging and the destruction of the rainforest in Borneo. And so I'm able to get into things which typically, if you're writing crime or mystery, you can't get into. Okay, the first four books were all basically business-driven books dealing with crimes that were related to businesses. So, and all of them based actually on real crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
They are real crimes, but I love the global nature of the books, because when you pick one up, you're going to get to visit an interesting place that you haven't been, or you may not ever go to, or maybe you have been there. I mean, Milan is not that wild, or Las Vegas, but right now we are in Sarawak, which I had to look it all up. Sarawak is one of the two Malaysian provinces on the Isle of Borneo up in the north, and there's a little wedge called Brunei, and there's the Sultan of Brunei, who's actually a British Raja, which I absolutely love. And then the southern part of Borneo is part of Indonesia. So for one island, it has remarkable political divisions. And you wrote an earlier book called The Two Sisters of Borneo, in which Ava Lee had a bad experience. So why did you decide to go back to Borneo?
It was the issue of the illegal logging. And the problem with the rainforest. I was doing an event in Ottawa 5 or 6 years ago, and a reader came up to me afterwards and said, there's the rainforest in Borneo is being destroyed. You need to get Ava involved in it somehow. Okay, and the idea just stuck with me. And plots come to me various different ways. Sometimes just organically, I'm writing a book and all of a sudden I realize I have a plot for another book or a continuation of a plot. And in this case, the plot idea came from the reader. Speaking of, that's the second time that's happened, because it happened to me before when a reader told me that he'd love to read a book that showed how Uncle and Ava met for the first time. And that led to the novella, The Dragon Head of Hong Kong. So, but yeah, so that's where that idea came from. It's from the reader.
Well, you've explored any number of industries. I mean, you've been in the fashion industry. Well, what happened is that, well, tell us about Ava Lee, because as I say, she's a forensic accountant.
Yeah.
She lives in Canada with her mother, who's the second wife of a Hong Kong business guy, financier, whatever it all is.
Yeah.
And so Ava Lee she has an interesting family to start with. I mean, her family is not an Orthodox family.
No, it's not Orthodox by Western standard.
Right.
It's not uncommon in Asia. The same. I mean, there are lots of second and third families floating around Hong Kong still, and Singapore, Bangkok, all of those places. And she doesn't think her life is particularly, that family structure is abnormal. I mean, she's been living within it her entire life and has had nothing but love and support within it. So for her, it's very natural. Yeah, but so she's the second daughter of a second wife. She's a forensic accountant trained at York University and Babson College in Massachusetts. And she's Chinese Canadian, obviously, and she's gay. So she's a different kind of character. And interestingly enough, I know people don't believe this sometimes, but when I sat down to write the first book, she came to me like completely formed. Okay, like I don't pre-plot books that much. I don't write detailed descriptions before I start writing. I basically sit down and I write. When I started to write the first book, the name Ava Lee came to me like absolutely nowhere. So there was no list of names I was trying to work through. She was just there. And when I started to write about her, she was there in entirety. Okay? I mean, I knew who she was immediately. Okay. I didn't realize she was gay. So until I got to like page 35, and I realized, oh my God, she's gay. So that's how that whole thing came about. So she is one of the best friends anyone could have. She's completely loyal. She's honest. She's as tough as nails. She practices a rarely known martial art called bagpipe. Actually, when I was writing about that, because I had to look, I didn't know any martial arts, but I had to do some research for that. I found that when I was writing about it. And I got an email from my instructor at San Francisco telling me he thought I had captured it perfectly, which made me feel pretty good. So anyway, yeah, so that's Ava. She's a huge combination of things. And she's honest, as I said. And when she decides to go after something or someone, she never stops.
She's really determined, and her version of justice is always an interesting one. But she's a relatively slim Asian woman, as you point out. Her first girlfriend, Maria, is off stage for almost all of the books, but then eventually Ava meets a Chinese actress, and she's much more prominent in the most recent books, and that gives you an opportunity to write about the movie industry, and particularly the Chinese take on it, which I find there's a film being made in this book, which is going to be difficult and controversial, but it brings some characters that you've introduced earlier back to life, including the director and the producer, who are people that Ava Lee has had an effect on. But because money is generally behind whatever is going on in these books, and because money moves around globally so much now, And there's so many industries that are global. I love the way that, you're going to be in a fascinating place. And you're going to be examining not just his political structure, which is very important in this book, but economics, and family relationships, business relationships, both Ava Lee's family. She gives a lot of credit in this book, Ian, which I really like, to her mother.
Yes.
The fact that Jenny, has, even though she and Marcus haven't had a really super close relationship for many, many years, Jenny moved to Vancouver and then she didn't like the climate and she relocated in Toronto, where there is a large Chinese community, right, in Toronto.
Half a million.
Yeah. But Marcus stays in touch with Jenny and his daughters on a regular basis. The time when it was difficult for Ava was when she was in Hong Kong and one of her half siblings was getting married, and Eva Lee had to meet Marcus's first wife, Elizabeth. And you let us know in that relationship that even though second and third families may be common, it is very stressful for Elizabeth to know that Jenny exists. And then there's a third family in Australia that I'm trying to remember. Have we ever actually met them?
Met whom?
The Australian family?
No, you never will. They're just.
Oh, okay. But they're there, they're there somewhere.
They are out there. See, you just planted a plot idea in my head, Barbara. So thank you for that.
Well, I mean, while we're racketing around Asia, Australia, and there's a lot going on between Australia and China, Taiwan. I mean, there's a new political alliance there, so forth. So stuff you can write about. But Marcus, has in his own way been he's tried to be kind of a hands-on dad, even if it's like halfway around the world. And Ava, one of the questions she has to deal with in this book, The Sultan of Sarawak, is whether she wants to see Marcus at all while she's in Hong Kong. So why don't you give us your idea of a plot summary of this book, and then I'll weigh in and tell us what I think the plot summary is.
There's a family in Sarawak who controls just about everything. And they've been illegally logging for years and shipping billions of dollars out of the province. And Ava and her partners in the Two Sisters of Borneo Body Furniture Company up north in Borneo. And they've opened up a little sub station, a little lumber shop, if you wish, in Kuching in Sarawak to sell lumber which is not from the forest, which is imported lumber. So it's not affecting the forest. And one of the big impacts in terms of the rainforest is the native indigenous people who are called the Penan. Their habitat is being destroyed, and they end up with basically no place to go. So that's sort of so they open up this little lumber shop, and the locals who are involved in illegal logging decide that they don't want it, and they bomb it. And one of Ava's employees is killed. And Ava sets out to find out who did it, why they did it, and what she can do to correct it. And she knows she can't take them on there because they control everything, the police, the media. She's nowhere to turn there. But she finds out they've been investing in Hong Kong and decides to take it out on them in Hong Kong. So she sets out with her associate, Sonny Kwok, is one of my favorite characters. And the little Jimmy Yip, his name is. And they set out to go after the family and make them suffer and make them pay. And at the end, she's semi-successful, I guess.
Well, Ava's always reasonable, I think, about what she can achieve. Sometimes, it's a little less than what she wanted, but it's maybe more than was possible. Yeah. So, you did leave some things on the table with this one, but I agree with you that that she probably got the best she could
Yes.
From this particular thing. But I like the fact that, originally Ava partnered with a man named Uncle, who by now is sadly deceased, but was alive during the early books and was a wonderful character. And he is a mountain master, which means he's the head of a triad in Hong Kong. So from you, I learned about red poles and white fangs and, how triads work. Who knew? And in fact, S.J. Roseanne just wrote a really interesting book called Family Business set in New York's Chinatown, in which those positions in the triads are still operating.
Yeah.
So anyway, working with Uncle, Ava went into asset recovery.
Yes.
They would be hired and by people who lost, it had to be a significant amount of money because Ava and Uncle would take a percentage. I'm trying to remember, didn't it run to like 30%? Wasn't that kind of their normal?
They take 30%, and 30% is the going rate in Hong Kong.
Okay.
That's a real number.
Yeah, they were chasing, different.
Million.
I mean, fascinating stuff. And one of her partners in what has become the Three Sisters Investment Company was one of the people being chased, or at least her husband was, in the Wuhan book.
Yes.
But now May has become a partner in Three. So Ava Lee, with Uncle dying and more money, so forth, coming into her hands, has really become now like a startup investor, or, she's more of a financier than she is a recovery specialist.
Worth a lot of money.
Yeah. And the three of them have, but going back to the two sisters in Borneo, one of the women, the three women, May, the Wuhan person who was once at odds with her, but now is close. Second one's called Amanda, and Amanda is married to Eva Lee's half brother, Marcus's son. And in order to, show Eva Lee learned from Uncle that she has to trust these other people she's working with. She runs the whole show. It's not, even though she is probably the one who should, that's not really entirely her role. So Amanda wanted to do this operation in Borneo. And so one of the thoughts they're having is whether they should exit when this disaster occurs in this book. Should they just get out of Borneo because it's never been that great? But they've lost maybe $3 million. And the insurance company, because of the corrupt way the officials in Borneo are treating the insurance company, doesn't look like it's going to pay off. Right. So, $3 million is not a lot for Ava Lee, but nonetheless, it's a hit for the company, right?
It's also the principle of it for her. There's always a principle attached.
Yeah.
It's never just about the money. There's always another issue driving it forward.
So having been smart enough to exit Sarawak right away when they see how the wind's blowing and going back to Hong Kong, I love the fact that Uncle kind of appears to Ava Lee. She has a bit of a dream, and there's Uncle saying, you really know what to do about this when you get to Hong Kong. Yeah. And because Ava Lee has constructed this incredible network of people, she's able to bring them into play and go after the Chong family in Hong Kong, where they have most of their assets, their financial assets and property they've invested so heavily in Hong Kong. So in her own playing field, she can do them some real damage she could never have done in Sarawak. So that's kind of the premise.
That was a great. That was a
fun
great
stuff about this book is you get to stay in Mandarin Orientals all over the world. Why are you so attached to the Mandarin Oriental hotel chain?
I always thought they were a great hotel chain, and the first time I stayed in one was in Bangkok on the river, and at the time it was rated the #1 hotel in the world, and I had a fabulous stay. So I just became fond of the Mandarin Oriental.
So with Ava Lee, you get to hang out in the bar. You get to have suites in the Mandarin Oriental at all times.
Yes.
And you actually got in a little dig at the peninsula in Hong Kong. Did that happen to you?
Yes, that happened to me. I showed up. We went to the peninsula. My wife and I went for tea in the afternoon. And I was wearing shorts and open-toed sandals, and they wouldn't let me in. They turned me away at the door. So I stuck that in the book.
Right. Well, I've had tea at the peninsula in Hong Kong, and it's true that the Mandarin Oriental and the peninsula were basically waterfront properties, but because they've kind of moved more land, it's like Chicago, where
Yeah.
they filled in behind Northwestern, all built out into Lake Michigan. Yeah, the peninsula is no longer waterfront property, nor is the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong, if I remember right.
No, it's not. The landfill is huge in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, so Ava Lee generally stays in the best hotel she can find in any city. So that part's great. She's a lavish tipper. But the other thing that you have so much fun with, Ian, is all the food. I mean, you can go through these books and experience absolutely fabulous food. You know, do you, have you personally eaten some of these extraordinary Chinese and other meals?
Yes, I have. I worked in Asia for 20 years, in and out of Asia. My home is still here in Canada, and I'm in business, so you were wining and dining or being wined and dined. And in Hong Kong, you ate Chinese food, okay, and it was fabulous. If you're in some of the other provinces and you were working, say, with the provincial government, they would arrange banquets. And the array of food was phenomenal. So yes, I've eaten just about everything I write about, and I really enjoy food. So
I think it's wonderful too. You have one really adventurous meal with Marcus and all. They go to a restaurant in Hong Kong, and some of the things they order. Wow, my most fabulous meal in China, or the one I remember the most, it wasn't the best meal, was in Xi'an, where we went to the dumpling house, and it's a 26-course meal. But unfortunately, we didn't know very much about Chinese dining at that point. We didn't realize that we were kind of eating it backwards. So we didn't pace ourselves, excuse me, as well as we should have. And I've always remembered sort of foundering at the dumpling house and thinking afterward, I wish that I had understood the nuance of Chinese dining better than I did. You must have learned it on the spot.
I sort of did, and what was difficult though, when you're doing these banquets, they serve you, so you're not taking your own food. They're serving you a small plate, large platter, and it's rude not to try everything. Okay, and they would serve some of the most exotic stuff that I didn't want to eat, but I was compelled to eat, right? And I remember one time they put this meat in front of me, and I said, "What is this?" And the guy said, "You know those animals in Canada you run over with your car?" Okay. It was raccoon.
Oh my God! Really?
Yeah, I had that. I had scorpion, fried scorpion, and the guy sitting next to me was a bit of a prankster. So we're eating the scorpion, and he says to me, "Oh, I hope you didn't eat the tail. That's poisonous part." And of course, I'd just eaten like 3 tails. So anyway, things like that. And then of course they have this fetish for freshness. Okay, so when you go to a large Chinese seafood restaurant, by and large, everything you're going to eat is swimming 5 minutes before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they've got the huge tanks out in front of the restaurant filled with the fish, crab, lobster, whatever. And you go and you pick it and cook it. But I was at a banquet one time, and it was with the governor of the province was our host. So it was like a big deal. And they bring out this huge fish. And he takes chopsticks and he hits it under the chin, and the fish, his mouth moved. Okay. And what they had done was they'd carved the flesh off the fish, cooked it, and put it back, but kept the fish alive. And for them, this was the quintessential definition of fresh. And I was appalled.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, the Elizabethans used to do that, with peacocks and stuff, they would roast them and then they'd put them all back together again with the feathers and the whole bit, but they weren't alive.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway,
Well, anyway, one of the questions that I always have for Ava Lee, since I wrestled with my metabolism my entire life, is she eats this phenomenal amount of food, although there are days when she barely eats at all. So she's forced, I think, not only she has a great metabolism, but she's a runner. And you do send her out most of the time in the books, in the different locations. She's out there in her Adidas pants and her running shoes and so forth. But in this book, it struck me that, maybe it was a little dangerous for her to be running around in Sarawak with all that was going on.
She went to run before anything happened.
Okay.
She went to run almost as soon as she arrived. So she wasn't known and she didn't know anyone. So it was perfectly safe. But she would never have run after the confrontation.
No, because you would be vulnerable. But she does run in Hong Kong, and gives you a chance to show us some of the city parks and other things. And I love the way you comment on how congested one of her favorite running things in Hong Kong would be. That by if she waits till later in the day, it was so filled up with people she wouldn't even be able to move.
Or even early, even the wrong time in the morning. I mean, it's Victoria Park is where she runs mainly. And it's right in the center of Hong Kong, or right in the center of Wan Chai, actually. And I think it's a 10th or a 12th the size of Central Park in New York. Okay. But it's jammed with people. I mean, Hong Kong, I think, is 99.5% apartment dwellers. Okay. So people don't have backyards and they don't have outdoor facilities ready available. And Victoria Park is the only place you can go to find greenery. Okay. So people flock there. And so they have a jogging path. They have a huge exercise area. They've got basketball courts, tennis courts, all kinds of things. And it's a real social experience. Going there in the morning, you really get a real sense of Hong Kong. Okay. When you travel in China, in major cities, most of them have parks in the center of the city. It's the same thing. Okay. You can go there and you'll see people set up sort of barber shops by a tree, hang a mirror in the tree, and they'll bring a chair and they give people haircuts. Or there'll be dance groups, people waltzing to an old record player. So it's a very social exercise. That's one of the things I like to do in all of my books is give the reader a flavor of a place. I really try very hard not to write travel logs. Okay? I want to tell you what I saw, what I experienced, and what interested me, rather than what the thing. So it means in the first book, when I was writing about Guyana, writing about Georgetown, I mean, I don't know how many pages I devoted to potholes, but it was quite a few. But when I was there, people obsess about the potholes because they're everywhere and they're gigantic. Okay, and the whole country is like 600 kilometers of road, and I bet you 500 of it is potholes everywhere. So it's an obsession. So I wrote about that. Then the other thing in Georgetown is they only have enough power for half the city. Okay, so they alternate from one day to the next, which part of the city has power. So when you're planning to go up to a restaurant, you have to figure out which one has lights and or not. Right? Anyway, and then then the other thing I do is I put people that I met while I was working and traveling in the books. Okay, because they interest me. When I was in Georgetown, I go down for breakfast in this hotel. Supposed 5-star hotel, there wouldn't be a 2-star anywhere else. I go down for breakfast and I see a guy sitting in the corner, Westerner, t-shirt with big Manchester United tattoo on his arm. And I'm the only other person in the restaurant, so he calls me over to sit with him. And the first thing he says to me, "Don't eat here." He says, the only thing that's safe to eat is the toast. Okay. I said, fine. Then he proceeded to tell me that he had been living in the hotel for 6 months. He was employed by Rolls-Royce. and that Rolls-Royce had the power station was the last one generated with the Rolls-Royce engine in the world. And that Rolls-Royce had sent him over to try to fix this problem they were having with the power at Georgetown. And he'd been there 6 months. He said, every morning they send a car for me. I go to the office. I get to the office. I say, did the parts I ordered arrive yet? And they say, no. So I go back to the hotel. I sit by the pool. I drink beer all day. I've gained 50 pounds. I've lost my girlfriend. So I put that in the book. Interesting character.
Well, I think you do a wonderful job. I mean, obviously, the way things work, you have to explain the financial structure, oftentimes, you know, the government structure or the power structure anyway, that that goes with it. And on a more micro level, how particular industries work. I remember there's one, is it the fashion one where at the end there's a big importing thing coming into the docks and you have, I think it was that one, where you have to stage a whole thing on the, is it Shanghai? Is that where they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like on the waterfront in lots of ways. And, you know, I thought of you because not long ago, I ordered a pair of tennis shoes. I can't remember from whom, but I might have seen it on Instagram or something. And I ordered these shoes and time went by and I sort of forgot about it. And then one day I got an email in which it said, you know, congratulations, your order has arrived at the port of Shanghai. And I thought, seriously, you know, it must be those shoes. It's the only thing I can think of that I've ordered that. And, you know, and I love the fact that they thought that I was now going to track it from Shanghai, you know, to Scottsdale, however all that was going to work. But it really reminded me of the global supply chains, you know, that how we know they've broken down during COVID to a great degree, but maybe we don't know as much as we could about how they've been built up. But in that particular book, I thought that you explained it really well, how, you know, that supply chain works and how Eva was able to achieve whatever goal and justice she wanted to, not in Milan, you know, but at the docks in Shanghai.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff. And what I try to do, Barbara, is get that detail woven into dialogue and woven into the story. So again, I'm just not reciting the fact that Shanghai has 100,000 containers a day going through the port. I mean, the numbers are staggering, you know. But again, I try to weave it into the story rather than just recite it, you know.
Well, you do. I mean, you're very good on dialogue and, you know, you really move your books along. One thing I like about them is the pace. Because you don't waste words or time, you know, the descriptions, everything kind of comes out organically, even taking time for the food or Ava Lee going running or whatever wardrobe. She has a really basic wardrobe she travels in, you know, like a Brooks Brothers shirt and black pants and one pair of shoes or two. So the books really, really move. And I love that. They average what, around 320
anywhere from 300 to 400
pages, something.
but they're fast reads, you know. But
They really are.
I mean, I really, and I work on pacing the books, and I'm not afraid to cut. Okay. So the Sultan, I believe, I think it's true. I think I cut 100 pages out of the book after the first draft.
I can believe that. You don't waste words at all. And so I read your books in one sitting. I mean, I'm a really fast reader, so that helps. But nonetheless, once I start into one, I always want to like see it to the end, you know, so I rock it through them. Talk to me a little bit about, because part of this book, we've talked about Sarawak and Hong Kong, but we haven't talked about Taiwan. And part of this book involves making a movie. And the movie is being made in Taiwan because they can't actually make a book about Tiananmen Square and that whole thing. They can't make it in Beijing. So what interested you in the Chinese film industry? This is not the first book in which that's been a major component.
Well, this is going to be major component, because the book I just sent into my editor is called The General of Tiananmen Square.
Ah,
And it's about the film being released and all of the attacks it comes under and that they come under. Okay. And the follow-up book to that is going to be called The Vigilante of Beijing. And I've started that already. And that's where Eva has to take on basically the Chinese government. Anyway,
wow.
getting ahead of himself. So the genesis of the whole thing, and this is the way my mind works, and I can't explain it, is in the book, The Goddess of Yantai, which is where Eva and Pancake, her new lover, really start to meld. Okay.
Mhm.
And Faye is being blackmailed, and Ava's trying to save her career. And in the process of doing that, Ava has to talk to Pancak's ex-husband, whose name is Lao Lao. And he was a very famous Chinese film director who fell victim to drugs and is now an absolute mess of a human being. I mean, he's living in an artist commune, and the guy is just a mess. Anyway, so Ava has to go and talk to him to get some information to help Pancake. But as I'm writing the scene, all of a sudden, it occurs to me, Ava is going to try to rehabilitate this guy, okay? Because she was a huge fan of his films. He was a wonderful filmmaker, okay? And she loved his films, and she keeps looking at this wreck of a human being and wondering if it's possible to save him, okay? And that idea came to me when I'm writing the book, okay? All of a sudden, Ava is, so that's sort of, I think near the end of that book, he agrees to go to rehab, okay?
Mhm.
Which takes you into the next book. In the next book, he's written a script, okay? And Ava and Pancake and everyone thinks the script is fantastic, but it's about the massacre in Tiananmen Square. And it's a subject in China which is so taboo. North Americans can't comprehend what it's like. I mean, even talking about it will get you a jail term.
Right.
Okay. And everyone's telling Eva, you can't finance this. You can't make this film. Okay. But she finds a way, as she often does, to be able to get her hands on some money and can never be traced back to her or her partners or the business. Okay. And sets up a banking and a corporate structure which protects them all. So she's got the money to make the film. And so in Sultan, they're making the film.
Right.
Okay. But that goes back, so the genesis of that goes back two books just in that conversation. And it will end 2 books from now, Vigilante of Beijing. So that's
Well, I think it'll be fascinating. Did you make Faye an actress so you could do this, or was it because she was an actress this plot occurred to you?
it's because she was an actress, because Ava meets her in the Princeling of Nanjing
Right.
when she's basically working as an escort girl to make extra money because she wasn't being well paid as an actress anymore. And that's when Ava met her. And then in the Couturier of Milan, they hire Pancake to work as a model. It's a high-profile model for them at the launch of their fashion line. And at the end of that book, Pancake comes out and comes on to Ava. It comes out as being gay.
Mhm.
That's where the relationship started. And I like writing about those sort of long-term growing relationships and the way they do grow. Like I hate things being static in the books, okay? The relationship she had with the first girlfriend, Maria, for example, okay? I used to get emails, especially from women readers, saying, we don't like Maria. Can you please get Ava to dump her? Okay.
Well, you never gave Maria a real fair chance. Let's
I
be
know
real.
that. I know, and I felt bad. I felt really badly for her, but she had to go. So Ava dumped her. And then I was getting emails saying, why was Ava so cruel to Maria?
Well, it is a very long-term series, but just to wind up, you also spun off from this some books about Uncle, because, we sort of had hints about how he got to Hong Kong from mainland China, and how he rose up in the triad, and how he became such a unbelievably powerful figure, with a whole network of people who were loyal to him with obligations. In fact, he has an heir called, is it Shu? Is that how you pronounce it? X-U?
Shu, yeah.
Shu. And Ava Lee, they're not related, but Shu is now the mountain master. And Ava Lee, in fact, in this book and in other books, her relationship with Shu is important. But I like the fact that you've given Uncle his own books. And is it a trilogy? Is that what you were writing about Uncle?
As usual with me, it was supposed to be a trilogy. It's going to be 4.
Yes.
So, I just submitted the 4th book to my editor. Actually, it's just gone up to typesetting. It'll be out in July, and it's called Finale. I guess the title sort of describes the end of the book. So so the first book first book is Fate, and it's how Uncle escaped China to get to Hong Kong in about his early days as a triad.
Mm-hmm.
The next book, which I loved, is called Foresight, and it's about how he recognizes before anyone that Xinjiang and the special economic zones are going to be huge and really important. And when he invests the triad money in Xinjiang, and this is all historically true, at the time, Xinjiang had a population of 35,000. Okay, today it's 12 million. Okay, it's boom. And he was on the ground floor realizing this was going to happen. And he was a big fan of that teeny little Chinese premier. Oh God, his name escapes me right now. But because he thought he admired him for his courage and his foresight. Okay. The 3rd book is called Fortune, and it's about how Uncle negotiates with the Chinese government to secure the triad's rights in Hong Kong and elsewhere.
Right.
And again, it's based on historical fact. The Chinese Communist Party is in bed with the triads. It has been for decades. And they used them almost as a paramilitary force in their favor. And Finale is about Uncle's last days and how he brings Ava and Zhu together. Okay. But that won't be the last of the Uncle books. Either.
I'm going to miss him. I'm really
He's
fond
coming back,
of Uncle.
Barbara. He's coming back.
Oh, okay.
So between The Water Rat of Wan Chai, which was the first Ava Uncle book, between The Dragonhead of Hong Kong, which is when the origin story when Ava met Uncle, and The Water Rat of Wan Chai, the first book, there's a 10-year span. I've got 10 years of stories to write. So
wonderful. Well, I really miss him. I understand why you wanted Uncle develops cancer and eventually dies in the books. But I love the fact that he's still really a presence and so important in Ava's life and in the reader's life. So it's a wonderful series. It keeps branching. I want you to live forever because, I'm planning to live forever. And that way I'll keep having books to read, which will be fabulous because I'm so addicted to this series. Patrick, why don't you come and see if we have any questions or comments that you'd like to offer before we run out of time?
Sure thing. Let's see here. Yeah, there are some good questions. Let's see. Let me go through some of these. Somebody mentions, he says, I love that you have broken down the Canadian Chinese food myth that deep fried chicken balls are a Western Canadian phenomenon.
Oh, that's great.
That's good. I like that.
Food is really a huge part of these books. I mean, and it doesn't get in the way or anything, but it's so much fun to read about it.
Laura wants to know, she asks, how do you research these books? How long does research take? Do you research before you write or while you write? Do you only write about places you've been? So there are a number of different questions in there.
Okay. I try to write only about places I've been. Sometimes I can't, though. Most of the time I do. B, when I was traveling and in those places, I was always reading about them, try to understand them, try to understand the culture, the people. And I retained a lot of it. I was shocked at how much I did retain. So I've got that as background. I do make sure that my memory is accurate, so I do research that as I go. And I tend to research as I go, not at the outset. So I have a basic plot idea. As I'm going along, I'm always running across things that I want to understand or know more about, and I research it on the spot.
One thing I can truly recommend as a reader is look up the maps. I mean, I thought for this book, I went and, did a look at Borneo so I could really understand the geography of it. And I think it helps a lot if you do that.
Let's see. What else do we have here? And just a comment, I think. He says, I appreciate how every single book addresses an entirely new industry, and we learn about places, society, and power in every book, but in a different way. It's a nice comment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Very nice. I would like to say also that in this book, I think this might be the first one where Ava is willing to recognize that they made an investment that isn't working out and that they should retire it. She wants to collect the money that they have lost in the fire. The insurance, since the insurance isn't going to cover it, she wants to, figure out how to get their money back. But this is one she's willing to walk away from.
Yes.
And I like that, because inevitably nobody's 100% right when investing. It's not possible.
No. And I like to think of her as actually being vulnerable, that she does make mistakes. She does screw up sometimes, and it eats at her. It's not something that she takes lightly.
Well, I don't think this was her screw up. I think that she went into this thing in Borneo with really, for a really good reason, which was to support Amanda.
Yes.
So she's recognizing that for all three of them, for the three sisters, it's time to move out.
Yeah.
And, and hoping that Amanda and I'm trying to remember, there's another woman whose name starts, that they recognize that, every once in a while you just have to walk away from something.
Yeah. Yeah. Mei-Ling Wong.
Paul wants to know, he says he likes the Sonny Kwok character and would like to know a little bit more about where he comes from.
If you read the Uncle books, there's actually a whole section in, I'm trying to think of which one it is, I think the second book, where Uncle meets Sonny. Sonny's a triad in the gang, and he's constantly screwing up. And Uncle's at the point of throwing him out of the gang when he actually meets Sonny and they get to talk. And he realizes that Sonny is this wounded soul that needs family. He needs someplace to be, and the gang is his family, and Uncle just can't remove him from it. So Uncle takes him under his wing and says, from now on, you're going to do exactly what I say. You stop thinking for yourself, and you're just going to do what you're told.
One of the great scenes that I think one of the great scenes that he has written in all of these books is Uncle's funeral. The people that come, the reasons that they come. I can't remember which book is it, Ian?
That is the Two Sisters of Borneo.
Okay.
No, yes, Two Sisters of Borneo.
That was a remarkable scene.
Barbara, I've written the two scenes that stick out in my mind. One was this Amanda Yee's wedding scene, when Ava is sitting at the head table and she sees Marcus's first wife and her sister staring at her. And she can see the hatred emanating from the sisters. And then Elizabeth, the first wife, gets up and comes and stands right in front of Ava and says, come here. And when Ava goes down, she says, give me a hug.
Yeah.
Okay. I loved writing that scene. It's so much fun. The funeral scene. So I'm writing the third book in the series. And all of a sudden I realized Uncle's going to die. And I knew he was going to die at the end of the sixth book. I don't know where it came from. It was just there, a thought in my head. And I started to write that funeral scene then in my head, Barbara. So I had that scene in my head. I carried it around for a year and a half. Okay. Just writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And when it came time to write it, it was the easiest thing imaginable. And this sounds so corny, but I actually cried at times when I was writing it because I get caught up emotionally in what I'm writing. Okay. So it's not a technical exercise for me. So.
Well, Sonny is a big part of Uncle and Uncle's life and Ava Lee. So I think
Yes.
he's a wonderful character.
Yeah, and Sonny will be there forever.
Good.
Sonny's not going anywhere. So he's permanent. Yeah.
Anything else, Patrick?
Let's see here. There are a couple that I'm avoiding asking just because they have some spoiler potential, and I don't want to do that. Let's see.
For this book or in general?
I think it's for this book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. One of them says, Paulette wants to know, she says, I don't understand why Ava told them she had a source inside the police department. Wasn't that putting Lydia Lazim at risk because so few people were aware of the meeting?
That's a very good point, and I can't answer it because I don't know how anyone would have known that she and Lydia knew each other or would have been able to connect them. Okay, so
there's less CCTV in Borneo than in London because if there had been a lot of cameras, it would have been clear. But because there isn't, I think they got away with it.
Thank you, Barbara.
That was my explanation because exactly the same question occurred to me. But then I realized that Borneo is not the surveillance state, or the city is not the surveillance state.
Plus when Lydia met with her, she wasn't in a policeman uniform. She changed it to civilian clothes.
Yeah, but she still could have been recognized if there had been cameras. But fortunately, there weren't.
Absolutely. No, I'm very proud of the fact I try to make my stories as plausible as possible. I'm not fond of serendipity. Like I like things to happen for a reason and to hang together well. So for something
Which is the book in the Philippines? Because I think the one in the Philippines is really terrifying.
The Imam of Tawi Tawi?
Yeah, it must be the Imam of Tawi Tawi or whatever. Lord.
That's the one. That's the genesis of that book, as crazy as it seems, is I was thinking to myself, if I was a terrorist organization and I wanted to kill like 10,000 people in a day, like how could I do it in a uniform, organized way? Okay, other than flying jets into skyscrapers. I began to think, well, what if I opened a culinary school and I taught all these would-be terrorists to cook? And I planted them in cruise ships all over the world. And then on one day, they put a deadly poison into the soup du jour everywhere. You could kill thousands and thousands of people. That's how I started thinking about that. And that led to the email of Tawi Tawi, which was, now that book went through 3 major rewrites before we were.
It's a pre-COVID book before, cruise ships were grounded, but still a really scary thought. The Philippine background was really wonderful too. So
well,
my connection is going bad, Patrick. So we need to wind up.
A little bit, yeah. Here's a good, maybe a good question to end on, which is the person doesn't give their name, but this is the only series I've reread more than once, he or she says. My question is, how far ahead do you plot the relationships?
Ooh-wee. Okay, so I said when I was writing the 3rd book, I knew where the 6th was going to end. Okay. when I was writing The Goddess of Yantai, I had a pretty good idea how the General Tenement Square was going to end. So that's 3 books ahead. So it's usually 2 or 3 books ahead that I like to know where I'm going. And I like to take my subplots and just gently sort of stretch them out, you know. So
You always have such great titles too.
Yeah.
Are those mostly yours, or does the publisher have an input?
they're mine. I'll tell you a brief story. So when I wrote the books, House of Anansi bought 4 at one go, okay? And I had no titles for the books. They were titled Eva Lee 1, Eva Lee 2, Eva Lee 3, Eva Lee 4. And that shows you a little imagination I have. Anyway, so we're getting close to the pub date for the first book, and I get a call from House of Anansi saying, we need titles for the book. And I said, but I thought you did titles. I thought, I write the book, you do the titles. I said, I thought that was the deal here. He said, no, we need titles. I didn't have any titles, okay? So I bombarded my friends and family endlessly for titles, none of which worked. So then I ended up going into Nancy to meet with them. And the Vice President, Matt Williams, says, what we should do, I think, it would be nice to find a family of titles, like Sue Grafton's, right? A is for alibi, that kind of family of things. And I said, well, I always liked the Disciple of Las Vegas for the second book about gambling. I always liked that thing. Okay, so Disciple of, says we can make that sort of work. So then we got to the Wild Beast of Wuhan. We managed to make that work. Then the Red Pole of Macau, which was the 4th book, and we still did not have a title for the first book. And he reached up and pulled out a book of Chinese zodiac, opened it up, and says, Water Rat. And I said, okay. And I said, Wan Chai is a Hong Kong neighborhood. We could make it the Water Rat of Wan Chai. He says, done. Okay. And the only problem, Patrick, was there was no mention of Wan Chai in the book and no mention of Water Rat. So
Details.
I had to go back in and insert little references in the book. Anyway, but at the time, I knew nothing about publishing. And I thought to myself, what a crazy business this is, right? So.
Well, we know that. Patrick and I know it's a crazy business for sure. So the good news is that the Sultan of Sarawak is now available. The bad news is that it's difficult to get a hold of the early titles in Ian's wonderful work. And I'm making it a personal mission, if I can possibly do it, to make sure that you can get your hands on the early Ava Lees.
Barbara.
Well,
Barbara,
you know, I can only do my best. Are they available in Canada? Is the problem the
Yes.
United States distributor?
I think the problem, actually, some of them maybe out of print here. I will be on it first thing in the morning, I promise you.
All right, well, I will be in touch too, because I
Please.
really think that this is the series you ought to be able to read in its entirety. And if you're not a digital reader, it's a little more frustrating. But anyway, I can't recommend them enough. You get a global travel, you get wonderful characters, you get great food, you can exercise by proxy. Nothing not to like in this series. So Ian, what a pleasure to see you again.
Barbara, thank you, Barbara.
With us.
Thank you so much for the support. I can't tell you how much it's appreciated. And Patrick, the same to you. Thank you. So nice to see you again.
You too.
Bye,
Our
guys.
pleasure, for
Thank you.
sure. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.